that. And we are going to swing in the other direction, and our next guest that we're going to bring on is Joshua Shapiro. You can take a look at Joshua's site. It is crystalskullexplorers.com. Now, I have had so much interest. I've done a little bit of research, but the whole crystal skull thing has been quite intriguing to me. And when I was doing a little bit of looking around on some of these different subjects, Joshua came up, and his websites are just unbelievable. All the information that's out there, and he's got a lot of stuff going on. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and get Joshua on the line. Joshua, good evening. Welcome to AM 630 and the Fringe Radio Show.
Thank you, Pat and Carol. Pleasure to be here and talk about my favorite subject.
Well,
Crystal skulls.
Great to have you here.
So, Joshua, how did you... I didn't read your bio because there's so much here. The whole crystal skull thing is so intriguing to me, and you are actually the first person that we ever had on the show to talk about this subject. And when I was looking into this, because we've had listeners send in requests about different subjects to cover, your name comes up all over the place. Why don't you give our listeners a little bit of the backstory, how you got into what you do and your work and your research? I'd love to hear it.
Thank you very much. My first, let's say, amazing contact with the crystal skull, and you have to excuse me, I had a little bit of a cold here this week, was in San Jose, California in 1983. I was going to a bookstore. I had a friend who had a metaphysical bookstore across the street from the Rosicrucian Park in San Jose, California. And at that time, I had just come out with my first book, Journeys of an Aquarian Age Networker, which was about my travels all over the country and different things I was finding out that had to do with the paranormal and spiritual and metaphysical. And on that particular visit in April of 1983, she pulls out pictures of an amethyst crystal skull. Amethyst, of course, is a purple quartz. And I had a very profound experience just with the photograph. First, I felt like my inside a very strong vibration, like an inner earthquake. And the next thing I know is shortly after that, there was a real earthquake in California. And the table that the picture was sitting on was vibrating. And after all of this happens, and I'm looking at it, I get this message, and I don't know where it comes from. Of course, now I have a better idea 30 years some later, but at that point I'd not really had contact with crystal skulls, that the crystal skulls are vital for the future of humanity. And what are you, Joshua, going to do about it? So that was a really powerful message that I got. Besides the powerful energy I'm experiencing, only, excuse me, with the picture of this crystal skull. So, of course, I have to see it. Now, for those listeners who know astrology, I'm an Aries. So when a challenge comes up, something unusual, different, unbelievable, you better bet everything you have that I'm going to be the first person that's going to dive in there and want to find out what's going on and why did I have this, strong reaction just to the picture.
Right.
So I was invited to an art gallery. There was a group of businessmen who had made an arrangement with some Mayan shaman from Mexico, or Mayan priest actually from Mexico, that he received a loan, and they procured various ancient artifacts from Mexico through this priest, and the crystal skull was one of them. And the agreement was that the Mayan priest paid back this loan, then he would get these artifacts back, and he never repaid the loan. So I went to this art gallery. A member of this business group had the skull, pulled it out, and then I had my real experience with the actual artifact itself. Basically what happened to me is I felt, and this is a key experience for me with many of the crystal skulls I've seen since then, which is in probably the now. I've basically lost count.
Mm-hmm.
And I could feel there was an energy field around it, and I was allowed to touch the top part of the skull, and an energy went from the skull through my hand into my arm and stopped at my shoulder. And I kind of had a mental image in my mind of this skull floating over my shoulder. And after this all happened, then I was allowed to have a picture of the skull, which I would take when I would do what I called my kind of New Age type of lecture, sharing with people, things I found. I would share the picture that I received, and people would have experiences thereafter. So that's how I got started. And eventually I met the co-authors of my first book, which was, I guess, in 1985 in California by San Francisco. And in late 1988, early 1999, we came out with our first book, Mystery of the Crystal Skulls Revealed. And through them, because one of the co-authors was F.R. Nick Nasserino, he had a lot of experience with crystal skulls, I was able to see more. But it's really that message that I received back in April of 1983 that these skulls are vital for the future of humanity that has propelled me to literally pour myself with my partner Katrina. We've been together since 2009. To share the best information that we have about the crystal skulls with whoever is interested and wants to listen. And of course, the Indiana Jones film in 2008 did also bring out, more people. Like I went to the airport with our crystal skulls, and people looking at them in the X-ray asked me, said, "These things really exist? This wasn't fantasy in the movie?" And I said, "Of course they exist." So it's been an interesting adventure, and of course, from all of these experiences, I think I have a pretty good understanding, why people are affected by it, why they are important for the future, why I got that message. Of course, most of these insights are from a paranormal perspective. And I did have a question for the two of you. Your radio is broadcasting out of Salt Lake City, is that correct?
Well, we are AM 630 is an AM station. We're a terrestrial AM station here in Salt Lake City. We cover the whole Wasatch Front all the way up to southern Idaho, all the way down south. And then we're also live on k-talk.com. It's a live link. And we're also live on the Inception Radio Network, where we're broadcast all over the world.
Okay, well, from the area that you're broadcasting, that would have been one area I would have never expected there would be a strong interest in crystal skulls, but there is. We have actually gone there and given presentations several times, and there are quite a few people who have their own crystal skulls, and I know that some of the so-called ancient skulls have also visited that area. So I think it's because there's a really powerful energy vortex in Salt Lake City which resonates with, what the crystal skulls represent. So I just thought I would mention that.
Yeah, very interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
What, Joshua? What is the origin of these skulls? And as far as in history, how far back do you believe they go in time?
Well, as far as the origin goes, there are many theories. Now, notice I'm underlining the word theory because I don't know if we actually know, the true origin, although I would suspect if there's anyone who knows it would probably be indigenous people. Because indigenous Native Americans in North America and Canada, and especially Mayans, Aztecs, Toltecs, descendants of those tribes, they see them as sacred objects. So it could be that they have some legends which you may not know about because they become very protective about them. But I'll give you kind of my intuitive insight.
Sure.
Based on what I've heard, what I think. First thing that would come to mind, because of some of the crystal skulls I've seen that have come out of the ground, which some of the indigenous people say, are quite old. That's where the term ancient or very old comes from. They talk about them being gifts from the gods. So I think that some of the crystal skulls, the very old ones, were actually gifts from extraterrestrials brought here as not only a sacred artifact, but a tool to assist humanity in its spiritual evolution and awakening. This is a common theme that I sense when I've had the chance to be around crystal skulls, that's really what their purpose is, at least for right now, is to help every single individual who comes into their presence. And I'm talking about the older ones. There are all different kinds of crystal skulls that exist now, to try to assist those individuals to remember who they are. I mean, the study of the paranormal is really cool because we have all these amazing phenomena that are going on, which we don't exactly understand. How is this happening? We try to explain it from a physical or scientific perspective, but there also is a spiritual perspective. And I think a lot more information is coming out now about the spiritual perspective, and this resonates very strongly also with the crystal skulls. The idea that there exists spirits in other dimensions, as well as beings that exist in other dimensions, who are beginning to have a stronger contact with us now. And the crystal skulls could be a tool that was given to us. It looks like us. The skull looks like the human bone skull. Mm-hmm. That, it creates a resonance, like, I can't remember his name, this guy who was involved with IBM, and then he got involved, Marcel Vogel.
Okay, yes.
He talks about the idea that quartz crystal, which is what the older skulls that have been found are made from, resonates with the bones in the human body. So if a person holds a piece of quartz, it's literally resonating with every part of their body because there are bones in every part of their body. So that would be my guess. Excuse me. Another possible source of where it comes from, and it gets us involved in a whole other area which some people think is impossible, but I know that this is absolutely true, is the hollow earth theory. The idea that Earth is hollow with a sun at the center, which is where the aurora borealis comes from, the northern lights that people see through the openings at the North and South Pole, and that there is a race, galactic races that live inside there, who brought crystal skulls, which could be the original skulls that were brought to this planet, brought these crystal skulls here, and as a result of that, other civilizations either had them or tried to duplicate them and knew that they were power tools that could help humanity. Certainly, Atlantis comes up as a place where crystal skulls were. In the temples, Lemuria comes up. So the crystal skulls are kind of like a link when you start studying ancient history, ancient mysteries, the paranormal, contacts with the UFOs. It links to everything. And the last thing that is very important, which I still don't know how this is going to take place, is the possibility these are the ancient computers, that the crystal skulls were able to record the frequency of energy of everything that took place around them, and that one day either some indigenous people or people connected to the ancient cultures will figure out a way how to get that knowledge and information, and that will help to save our world and take us into a golden age. So there's a lot of things that are connected with crystal skulls, and but a lot of it is theory. But I do know there's an energy field around them. It affects people, and a lot of people's lives have changed for the better because they had contact with these skulls.
Let me ask you, Joshua, through with your research, and obviously you've delved into the subject so deeply. These skulls through history and ancient times, just like when we talk about ufology and flying saucers and different what we could interpret as craft that maybe extraterrestrials used. We see these in pictures in paintings in the Vatican and in different places like this. Are there works of art through in history through history that these skulls are maybe a little hidden, but if you kind of dig into it and look into it, do they present themselves in any sort of historical artwork?
I don't know so much if I would say it's about artwork. I just think that in the history linked to the Mesoamerican people in particular, or the Native American people, they have a sensing. They're connected to the natural energies of the earth and energies and objects. They just knew that these were objects that were very important that would help to heal them or give them knowledge. So I think this is more of the way that they looked at it. Now, it could be from an artistic point of view because, like, for example, there was this ancient amethyst skull, which now has a name of a moon. I once tried to see if I could have that skull come to a conference I helped to create in Holland in 2006. And the people who had it said, the only way we'll let it go is it has to be insured. And so in order to ensure amethyst skull, it was looked at as, an artistic object. What is its value from that perspective, as well as the material it's made from, which has nothing to do with, what the artifact is.
Right, right.
So, so if somebody finds an artifact, they're going to look at it and say, oh, these tribes or people were carving them, and it was artistic representation. And some of the skulls, the way they look, you could say they're kind of stylized, which could be looked from an art perspective. But, I just don't see that connection with it. I just see them as a sacred tool that has energies connected to it, and even living consciousness, which is what I talked about on the National Geographic interview I was on, but they didn't understand what I was trying to explain, a living consciousness that seems to work through the skulls. Because a lot of people who have their own skulls, and these are the new ones being made, obviously, they're having names for them. They're communicating with them. The same thing happens to us. We have, like, conversations. It's almost like it's a person you're talking to. So I think because of the material they're made from, especially quartz, which allows communication with other dimensions, that spirits are able to work through these skulls, and that's maybe where the source of their energy is coming from. So there's a living consciousness. It's the same thing like with a person. Like, I was present when my mother passed away, and I'm sensitive to energy. And when I saw her body in the hospital, the essence of who she was totally gone. There was nothing there that was connected to her. It was just a husk. So I think that there may be intelligences which are saying, we want to communicate with humanity, but we don't want to scare them. So we'll just kind of work through these crystal skulls to have contact with them and help them. And they'll kind of accept that rather than aliens coming in their true form, frightening people.
Right.
So, that's the best way I know how to answer your question.
Now, let me ask you, Joshua, with crystals, people talk about, the healing power of crystals. Do you feel that when the crystal is in this skull configuration, if you will, you did mention about maybe an ancient computer, maybe like I guess maybe you'd have to look at it as almost like an ancient USB stick, something that could hold a lot of different maybe memories and energies and what have you. But do you feel that the skull configuration versus just a crystal, what we define as a crystal, is so much more powerful and is so much more concentrated?
Well, the best way I could answer that is look at our own human bone skull. I think, and of course this is just my opinion, that there was an intelligence a long time ago that decided there would be beings that would be on the earth that look like us now. And they decided to create us in this form. And one of the things that they chose was the shape of the skull. Now, if we work with a pyramid, for example, you go 1/3 of the way down, if it's in the true pyramidical form. You go 1/3 of the way down from the top of the pyramid, and there's strange phenomena that occur, strange energies there. Metal rejuvenates, for an example. So I think that this shape of the skull was divinely created, if you will, because it allows the potential within every human being to have access to universal knowledge and consciousness. It's the shape. It allows that information to come in. So if we work with a piece of quartz crystal, which already is a transmitter and receiver to other vibrational frequencies and dimensions, and we put it in that shape, and then we start to work with that, or a spirit decides to come through it, it's kind of like either serves as an energy vortex or gateway for all this energy and information to also be available to us. So this is my sensing. It's totally the form that makes it possible. So the closer that a person is able to make the skull to actually human bone skull, which with the ancient skulls, the one that I've seen, which is very close to our bone skulls, the Mitchell-Hedges crystal skull, named after F.A. Mitchell-Hedges, that was found in 1924 in an ancient city called Lubantin, which is now in Belize, but was British Honduras at the time. I think what it does is it sets up a really strong resonance with, our own bone skull, that these very advanced skulls that have been found in this shape which just within the last couple of years, modern carvers are starting to be able to duplicate in form. But when I was interviewed for the National Geographic program, what they did is they send the measurements of this Mitchell Hedges skull to Chinese carvers, and they duplicated the skull. But when we saw it, it was blank. It had no energy. There was nothing about it except that its form looked similar. So this is part of the reason why we believe that once a crystal skull finds its true guardian, the person it's supposed to go to, and they begin to work with them, then the doors open for a living consciousness to start working through, just like in the human body, without the soul being present to animate it and make it alive, it would just be a body with nothing. Mm-hmm. So it seems a similar concept to what I see with the skulls.
Very interesting. Joshua, you want to take a call?
Yes, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Caller, good evening. Welcome to K-Talk. You're on with Joshua Shapiro.
Yeah, I'm just curious if Joshua has any hard evidence to back up some of the claims.
Very good question. And, of course, for all the people who are coming from a scientific perspective, this is always the question they ask: how do you prove this? And, as a matter of fact, on the National Geographic program, they actually took a lot of my statements and they tried to do something in order to prove or disprove it. The major challenge that I see between scientific and the paranormal is that the scientists are unwilling to go into some aspects and relative to the paranormal in their research. They're limited to what they believe is true. But here are some of the tests that we were able to perform. We're not scientists. We probably didn't have enough people we tested to make this conclusion. So I can only say what happened, and we never have any scientists say, this is interesting what happened. I'd like to expand on this. We took a device called a meridian stress test system. In Europe, this device is allowed to be used to do an analysis on an individual as far as, what their current state is, because what it does is it measures the meridian energy in a person's body. In the United States, I think I heard from some medical doctors that they were allowing it as a device to try to understand what's going on with the person, but they could not prescribe a cure like in Europe. The device is set up with a computer. After it gets the measurements on these meridian points on the body, it will actually come up with suggestions of remedies to take and how to help the person with the challenge they have. So what we did, and we did this for the Sci-Fi Channel, but they did not show it on the program, probably because it was hard to explain the results of the test, is we had various people that we tested with 3 objects. We tested one with a regular piece of quartz crystal. We tested the people with a contemporary crystal skull, which is defined as a crystal skull that a modern carver makes, and we tested them with the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull. They were blindfolded, so they couldn't see which object they were being tested with, and the way this device worked is the object you wanted to see how it affected a person was put on kind of like a metal plate. The computer was able to receive the measurements from the person, the meridian measurements. Basically, the way the machine worked is if a measurement responded to 50, like let's say they're measuring the meridian point connected to the heart, that particular meridian point is in absolute perfect balance. If it's within 5 of that, 45 to 55, they still consider that to be balanced. A measurement that is lower than 45, the person is out of balance, has tension or pressure, and a measurement over 55 means there's some kind of illness related to that meridian point. When we put people with the Mitchell Hedges skull, we had a problem, because what happened is after they were exposed to that skull and then they were tested with something else, they already were in balance. So we couldn't see the measurements with the contemporary skull. We couldn't see the measurements without the skull. When we worked with the person who was the guardian of this skull, his name is Bill Ullman, as soon as he was around that skull, it's like almost all of his measurements immediately went into what we would call a balanced energy. So the only thing that was happening for these changes was the person was put in the presence of the crystal skull. We have done these kind of measurements with one of our personal skulls, which is a modern skull. This modern skull has had the opportunity to travel the world and be in the presence of some of these very old skulls. And we noticed that after that happened, the effect that the skull had upon people was much greater. In other words, their measurements were closer to being in balance. Normally, when we test this with our skull, let's say we just take a piece of smoky quartz, which is what it's made from, and put people in the presence of the smoky quartz or the skull itself, they always have more balanced energy readings with the skull than they do with the piece of quartz. Now, what does that say? Does that say that something's going on because we had the ability over several years to maybe test between 75 to 100 people? No, I can't say. I'm not a scientist. But I just know that almost every week we receive emails from people all over the world who are sharing with experiences of what happens to them with their crystal skulls, talking about having conversations with them, a healing they receive. Like I think of another story.
So the short answer is no.
Huh?
So the short answer to my question is no?
The short answer to your question is, through the research we've done, we see that there's an energy that's effective.
Have you ever published,
whether a
have you ever
scientist
published
is
this
going to
research?
accept this or not?
Have you ever published
They
this
could
research?
say, no, it's a piece of stone. There shouldn't be anything going on. It shouldn't change its physical presence, but it does.
Have you published?
Huh?
Have you published any of this research in any peer-reviewed journal?
No, I've only published this research in my own book. That's
Okay.
Well, no journal.
One last piece of advice. If you would just stop breaking the Haldol in half, I think your life would be a lot better.
Oh, be nice.
Oh, come on. Stop putting crazy people on the radio and making it sound like they're...
Go ahead, Joshua.
Yeah, go ahead. Maybe if you had a skull and touched it,
Another
make him
ignorant,
calmer.
educated person. Go ahead.
It's not a problem. I know there are people who think this is all crazy. And for me, if this was only happening, say, to my partner and I, and we weren't hearing from other people or whatever, then we'd say, well, yeah, maybe this is just something for us. But many people who have the opportunity to see the older skulls or the new skulls, they're having these same kind of experiences. There should be more research done on this. And I agree with the gentleman, there should be. But if nobody wants to support that, then the only thing you can do is just like when you see a UFO, you see a Bigfoot, you see a spirit or whatever, you can report your experience, and you're going to have some people who say you're insane and crazy.
Yeah, well, it's to each their own. If it works for you, great.
It's about
If it
being
doesn't,
open-minded.
it's
That's
great
right.
too.
That's
It's
right.
just give it a try. You really can't judge something unless you try it anyways.
Right.
Like I carry amethyst in my purse. Does it help? Maybe, maybe not. But I carry it there just in case.
Right.
No, I think it helps me feel
If
better.
it helps
So that's
you
all
out,
that matters.
hey, that's more. There's been a ton of people that have been healed by a placebo
than the real drugs.
because of the real drugs, because of having the right state of mind.
Exactly.
And if that helps them,
Hey,
and
you
if
know
it
what?
helps you, hey,
It's just about getting through
that's
life.
Right. It's about exactly. Another question for you, Joshua, was what is your take on the theory of the 13 skulls? Is this something you believe in? Is this something you could talk about a little bit?
Well, naturally, this belief or theory has come up repeatedly in many places that we've gone. Many people who have intuitive insight that feel a great affinity for that, including myself. As far as how can you prove something like that, I don't know. But the number 13 seems to come up in many different world religions, in many different situations. So, it's possible that there could be a special set of 13 crystal skulls that exist, which maybe we know of some, maybe not. Like, for example, in the Hebrew religion or Jewish religion, they have the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 13th is the priest or the Levite. Christianity has Christ and the 12 apostles, and there are many people who believe that our solar system has 12 planets. Now, we know of 9, and I think scientists are willing to agree there might be one beyond Pluto because of some gravitational effects to its orbit. But George Hunt Williamson, who was an early UFO contactee, had talked about that there might be 2 planets before Mercury, which we cannot see because of the light of the sun. It's just too bright to hide, to have them.
Right.
So I think with the crystal skulls, it's the same, that there could be a circle of 13 skulls, one in the center surrounded by 12. It could have been in Atlantis that they had these skulls, and some of the legends talk about that when this special set of 13 skulls.
All right, everybody, welcome back to the Fringe Radio Show. Our guest tonight is Joshua Shapiro. Joshua, thank you so much again for giving up some time out of your Saturday night and being here with us.
No, not a problem. Always a pleasure. I think in the future that there's going to be more things happening around the crystal skulls, and I think it's important for people to have some awareness of them and the possibilities. And, of course, the best way to know them is to have a direct contact and experience with one and see what happens.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, do a lot of people, I imagine, they meditate with them, don't they, Joshua?
Oh,
meditation. Yeah.
Most definitely.
That's the
And, the crystal skulls, like I say, communicate with, we call them the guardians or caretakers. And sometimes we call them our crystal children, ask us to take them to certain places. There's a lot of beautiful natural places around where we live in the Seattle area. Or some people tell us that they're requested to take them to ancient sites, so they'll, go like to Mexico where there are some old Mayan sites or sacred sites like in England, Stonehenge, Avebury, etc. So, yeah, it's very interesting.
We actually had a lot of questions emailed in for you. Let me go ahead and run these by you and get your take on it. Bill in upstate New York writes in and says, Josh, what is the smallest and largest skull out there?
Well, as we talked about, modern covers are making skulls, so I've seen crystal skulls made that are like marble size. And I know that this carver from Brazil, who actually made the first skull that I have, a 10-pound smoky quartz skull, he's made some skulls that are over 100 pounds in size, so they're quite huge. As far as, I'd say, more older skulls that have been found, I think there's been some between 17 and 20 pounds. Normal weight for a quartz skull for human size would be between 11 and 12 pounds. So
pretty good size.
Twice the size.
So pretty good size.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the one thing with the Indiana Jones film, that they were throwing the skull around, that would be impossible. Because the skull the size they show would be at least 25 or 30 pounds. This 10-pound skull that I have, I can barely, throw it maybe 2 or 3 feet at the most.
Right.
So it's not so easy a thing to do.
Another question for you is, Bill writes in also, says, when you have a group of skulls that are together, is there any harmonic resonance or other noticeable changes?
It depends upon what the skulls are, and let me preference that from some experiences. In the case of the personal skulls that we have, they all resonate with each other, so there's no disharmony energies with it. However, let's say you have some people who have different types of skulls and they've never worked together and come together. I remember when we did this conference in Holland, we had some friends who bought, what was the skull made out of? They weren't quartz skulls. They were, I can't remember the material. It was a different material than quartz, and these were old skulls that purportedly were found in Mongolia, and they just were totally different. And it didn't feel like, even though people had positive experiences, jade was what they were made out of. Mm-hmm. With these jade skulls, when they were put with the skulls from the other speakers, which were quartz skulls, they weren't resonating totally together. So just because different people have different crystal skulls does not mean automatically that there's going to be harmonious energies. It's something that you have to kind of work together on. And, it's like if you have a group of musicians that have never played together before, they got to practice before they are able to harmonize. So it's going to be the same thing with the crystal skulls. Sometimes, you bring them all together and it works. Sometimes not. Take some time of, doing some meditation or working with them. So it just depends. And it depends, too, on who the guardian is, how are they using this skull. If they're using this skull, like in the World Peace Meditations that we have on the 13th of every month, where we send out a very loving, peaceful energy to the planet, or are they using it for personal gain, or some other purpose? So that has a lot to do with it also.
Do you also feel that different skull, and maybe this is a crazy question, but do you feel that, at least in your experience, do you feel that different skulls resonate differently? I mean, they all are very unique and one of a kind?
Yes. Every crystal skull that I meet is unique. It has a different feel to it, a different energy. The example of that would be what we did is these Chinese covers we were working with, we sent them pictures of one of our skulls and we said, is it possible that you could duplicate this form of skull? And they said yes, and they did a really good job. But when the skull came, that was a duplicate of one of ours, initially it was similar in energy, but over time it went in a totally different direction. The energy started to change. So I personally believe that every crystal skull has its own vibrational energy, its own signature, if you will. And that's a good thing because our planet right now needs all these different frequencies and energies that they carry collectively. So, yes, it's unique and different, definitely.
Very interesting. Josh, why don't you tell us about what you have coming up? Do you have any books in the works? You indicated to me through some emails that you have some stuff coming up. You want to tell our listeners about that?
Sure. Well, like I just mentioned, on the 13th of every month at 1 p.m. local time, we do a world peace meditation. We have a web page with an audio file people can listen to be guided through the meditation. They do not have to have a crystal skull to join us. And we've been doing those meditations since January 1st of 2009. The latest book that we have out is called Journeys. Let me think about this because you have several. Journeys of the Crystal Skull Explorers, Travel Log Number 2, Search for the Blue Skull in Peru. This is a book that is available on Amazon, or they can get copies of it from us. It's basically about 3 travels that I took between 1997 and 2002, following the vision of a blue skull that I'd had for many years in Peru and talking about everything that happened to me around those 3 trips. As far as another book, I'm thinking there was a large book I originally did called Journeys of the Crystal Skull Explorers, but I never got it printed in English in a printed form. There were some e-book versions of it, 2004, 2005. So I'm thinking possibly to go back over it, to update it, and make it available later this year, because it's really a collection of everything that I've seen with crystal skulls. The history, interviews with different guardians, some of the research that we did, etc. There is also another book, too, I'm thinking to do this year. I don't know if I'll be able to do both. That'll be more of a book on the paranormal that will be inspired writings, which just means I'll be sitting and, kind of like getting ideas of things. And what I think this book will be about is trying to explain and tie together a lot of the paranormal activities that are going on in the world and why these things are happening and, what's the principles or the universal laws that are behind that. So those 2 books. And then, of course, we help people to get their own crystal skulls on our website, crystalskullexplorers.com. We have the books are there. There's a free e-book people can get. They can sign up for our free newsletter. And sometimes we also share, other books as well as how to get your own crystal skull. So these are the basic things that we're working on at the present, and we're always open that new activities may come up at any time. Of course, I have a film project too, a script, working with film writer in Australia, which is kind of a vision of how the world may see peace in the future, linked to the 13 skulls that you asked me about before.
Uh-huh.
And, I have no idea if that will ever come to pass or if we'll just do the book on it, about the story. But it is in a, script form.
Very interesting. Do you do conferences and stuff, Joshua? Do you are there Crystal Skull conferences, or does it kind of get rolled in with other things?
Well, there have been Crystal Skull conferences. Some of them I've been involved in helping to create them. A couple in Europe I was involved with, either as an advisor or an organizer. And then in the end of 2012 and in the early part of 2013, we experimented with an online conference where I invited other Crystal Skull teachers and guardians and researchers to join us. But as far as recently, not that I'm familiar with, there haven't been as many conferences as there used to be. But, occasionally they do come up, and sometimes I am invited to participate.
Very interesting. Joshua, we got to wrap up in just a minute or two. You want to give out your website and where people can go and look at your work and your information?
Yes, absolutely. So again, the best website for people to go to would be crystalskullexplorers.com. That's explorers plural. Or if they look up my name, Joshua Shapiro, and Crystal Skulls, I'll come up, on Google on the first page, even under my name. I think you'll see either some politician in Arizona or you'll see me.
Gotcha.
So,
better you than the politicians.
Well, thank you for that. So, and people can feel free to email us if they have any questions or they want to know how to get the free ebook we have or the newsletter. Happy to answer.
Well, sounds good. Well, Joshua, we're going to say goodnight. Hope you start feeling better.
Yes.
And I want to thank you for giving up the time and talking about your work and your research. It was very interesting, and hopefully, again, it's all about being open-minded and thinking about the possibilities.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this chance, and I enjoyed it.
Okay, Joshua, take care. We will stay in touch with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night, Joshua. Good night.
Bye-bye.